Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Rahm Emanuel may be a Democrat in one of the most democratic cities in the world, but that doesn't mean he is popular there. The city of Chicago is falling apart in a lot of ways, you may have read. It is deeply in debt, over $50 billion in debt. There were 650 murders there last year. Most of the schools are genuinely terrible. You would not send your own kids under any circumstances. So not surprisingly, polls of Chicago voters from last year showed Rahm Emanuel's approval rating at about 25%. And with numbers like that, there is no chance he will be reelected next year. But like a lot of unpopular Democrats, Rahm Emanuel has a plan to keep himself in power. If he can't win over existing voters, and he hasn't been able to, he can create new ones. Chicago is rolling out a new government ID card called City Key. A few months ago, Emanuel explained that City Key is intended to bring illegal immigrants, quote, out of the shadows. City Key is designed to thwart federal law enforcement. The cards don't store personal information. ICE can't use them to enforce federal law, and that's intentional. Now, Chicago has announced that these cards, which were designed for illegal aliens, can be used for voter registration. In other words, non-citizen illegals will be able to vote in the city of Chicago, including in federal elections that affect you. Now, that's illegal. Congress passed a law against it. It's explicitly illegal, and yet the city is encouraging it. When a reporter asked Alderman Gilbert Villegas about this all, he made it clear he didn't care. Quote, "There's nothing stopping someone from getting a fake ID now and going to try to vote," he said. And that's true, of course, but there is a significant difference between ignoring voter fraud, which is wrong, and abetting it, which is horrifying. Authorities in Chicago want ineligible voters to vote. Now, why would they want that? As the Chicago Tribune pointed out, it's pretty simple. Rahm Emanuel wants to get reelected. If it takes illegals to do so, fine, whatever it takes. We contacted the mayor's office for comment today about this. They did not even bother to respond. The Justice Department, for some reason, doesn't seem to be doing anything about any of this. And it's not just happening in the city of Chicago. In the state of California, illegal immigrants get driver's licenses, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, and they can use those to register to vote, and some doubtless do. In the state of Maryland, some towns are trying to legalize voting for illegal immigrants. How long until that's a Democratic Party platform plank? How long until some federal judge in, Hawaii declares that preventing illegal aliens from voting is racist and demands they get the vote immediately nationwide? It's coming. Of course it is. The left wants power, and this will give it to them. Chicago Alderman Amaya Pawar sponsored the bill creating the new IDs, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Alderman, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So do you support non-citizens voting?
I think there's a misunderstanding of what the City Key is. It is a library card. It's access to our mass transit. It is a municipal ID that gives people who are exiting homelessness the opportunity to present an ID where a driver's license or a state ID might be too expensive. And it also is available to our undocumented neighbors. But let me be also clear. In order for someone to register to vote, they would have to sign an affidavit and present a birth certificate, a passport, a social security card, and potentially this. So you'd still need a second form of ID. And if you defraud the Chicago Board of Elections, the Illinois State Board of Elections, and you are undocumented, you are subject to deportation. So this is not a municipal ID.
So I just want to get this on the record because you're factually inaccurate here, but I just want to hear you say it to be sure. So you're saying that in order to register to vote in the state of Illinois, you need to produce evidence of citizenship. Is that your claim?
Yes, it is. I also think it's important to recognize that what you're suggesting is that the city of Chicago, the Illinois State Board of Elections, the Chicago Board of Elections, and undocumented neighbors are all coordinating with one another.
I'm not suggesting. Well, slow down. I'm not suggesting a conspiracy, and I want to get back to my original question in just a minute, which is, do you support non-citizens voting? Because I think it'll be interesting to hear your view of that. But I'm not suggesting a conspiracy. I'm merely saying that when you let illegal aliens use this card, which was designed in part for them, and don't be disingenuous and pretend otherwise. That would be a lie, as you know. The mayor bragged about it. When you let them use this card to register to vote, when in fact you are not required to show proof of citizenship to register in Illinois, you're wrong. You have to say that you're a citizen. You don't have to prove it. You're abetting voter fraud, and you know that.
It's simply not true. I know the rules to be a voter registrar. There are laws in place, and frankly, I just don't feel like it makes sense to turn communities into the other. See, in Chicago, we like to celebrate our neighbors. We like to say that people...
Look, it's not a question of celebrating your neighbors. You can celebrate someone, appreciate him, take him to dinner, while still understanding that only citizens are allowed to vote. And so let me ask my question for a third time. Do you think non-citizens should be allowed to vote in our elections?
The federal law, state law, says that only citizens can vote. And the idea, I'm not going to sit here and play a game where we're going to demonize undocumented people.
I'm asking you very simply, what do you think? There's a federal law passed in 1996, it's in the U.S. Code, that says that non-citizens cannot vote in federal elections. They're allowed to vote.
Of course.
Right.
I believe in the rule of law.
Do you believe, well, obviously you
don't
don't believe in federal law, because this city card, the ID that you made possible, is explicitly designed to prevent federal immigration authorities from enforcing federal law. So obviously you don't believe in some federal laws, but I just want to know what you think. Do you think if you could make the law, would you allow, as a theoretical matter, non-citizens to vote?
I mean, no, of course not. I mean, we have laws in the books to make sure that citizens can vote. I just don't believe in demonizing undocumented neighbors. I don't believe in turning people into the other. That's just not how I run my office. This is not why I ran for office.
But hold on.
As the son of immigrants. Well, I'm a son of immigrants. And when I hear this kind of rhetoric...
That's irrelevant. You were born in this country. You're a citizen. So I guess the question is not, do you like all people here? That's a totally separate category. The question is there a meaningful difference between a citizen and a non-citizen? And you're trying to erase that difference. Okay. So what would be the differences? What do you think should be the differences? What should citizens get that non-citizens don't?
Well, I mean... There are lots of non-citizens, by the way, who pay taxes. There are lots of non-citizens, undocumented neighbors who serve in our army, who serve in our armed forces, who have died for both of us. You're trying to elide past
my question. Again, this is not a referendum on whether they're nice people or whether some of them add a lot. I mean, I agree with you.
Some of them have given their lives.
Okay, that is absolutely true. But I'm asking you a much deeper question, and you may not get this in your political life often, but it has to do with citizenship, which is the foundation of the country. So what is the distinction between citizens and non-citizens? What do citizens get that non-citizens don't? Why is that a meaningful distinction?
Well, citizens have access to a Social Security card and some more access to our social safety net. And those distinctions have always been in place, which is why people work so hard to come here to become a part of our American fabric. This is what my parents came here. I just don't believe that, you know, these dog whistles, and I'm not suggesting you're making them. What I am saying is that people around the country...
What do you mean by dog whistle? What does that mean?
What I mean by dog whistle is that there seems to be a national rhetoric to pit poor white people against poor black and brown people.
You actually don't have that in your city? Wait, hold on. And I'm sorry that you, and I know you've got a history of race baiting, so I'm not surprised you did that. But I just want to ask you, let's be real. This is Chicago. Chicago is not a city where anybody's trying to win a lot of poor white voters. African-American voters are dissatisfied with the mayor. And everyone I know who covers Chicago politics says this is an effort to basically ignore them in favor of a new class of voters, some of them non-citizens. So it's not about whites on any level. Please don't bring it to that.
It's just not true. It's just not true. There is no grand conspiracy between Chicago elected officials, the mayor's office, the Board of Elections, and people in the city to say, let's defraud our electoral process.
So what is the city doing? Hold on, but what is the city? I mean, this is the actual foreign interference in our elections, the idea that foreigners could be voting. So you're doing a lot for illegal aliens in your city. What are you doing to prevent them from voting in elections?
So let's also be clear. There's one, evidence that the Russians' foreign influence has meddled in our elections.
Well, there's more evidence that foreigners are voting in our elections. So what are you doing about it if you care about foreign interference?
I mean, hey, I want to know why the Corbatch Commission was disbanded, because they were certainly looking for all this information about
what are you doing? You just gave an ID card to people here illegally in violation of our laws, and you're letting them use that card to register to vote. What are you doing to prevent them from voting? My family will have that ID card, and will use it to go check out books at the library, just like someone else will. I'll use it to get on a train. I mean, this is a municipal ID. But I'm talking about voting, which is different from all those things, but you don't want to answer the question. I appreciate it, Mr. Alderman. We're out of time. It's been 9 minutes. Anthony Napolitano is also a Chicago alderman, and he joins us now. Mr. Napolitano, thanks for coming on. So this seems, what is the city doing to make certain that people who are not allowed to vote under federal law, who are not citizens, are not voting? This seems to make it easier for them to vote, despite what the last guest just said.
Yeah, very so. You know what? First of all, thanks for having me on the show, Tucker. The funny thing about this, the way this ID is set up, is actually enticing illegal immigrants to obtain this ID. And it's doing it such that they're telling people that when you obtain this ID, any information you give us, we are going to discard it after that, which means anybody that's illegal, come and get this ID. And the hard thing for us to swallow, you know, is that the Illinois State Board of Election is actually stating that you can use this ID as a form to register to vote. And the onus is solely on the applicant to attest that they are a citizen or not a citizen.
Exactly.
So we're operating government on the hopes that people are going to follow those rules, and they're here illegally anyway. So what's our hopes are that they're going to check that box, and it scares a lot of us, and it's not what we're looking for. I'm a son of an immigrant as well.
But well, there are a million immigrants. It's not a question of who's an immigrant. The question is who's a citizen. Who has a right to vote and who doesn't? And it's not about race either, obviously. So the question is, what would prevent an illegal alien, a non-citizen with this card, from voting in an election in Chicago?
Absolutely nothing, Tucker. Absolutely nothing. And here's the crazy thing about Chicago is we have committeemen that go out and they have register to vote forums. And that is going to be in a gym with maybe 200 people in there in a more comfortable setting where checking that box that you attest that you're a citizen could be a lot easier. And all that paperwork is just sent in and you receive a voter card in the mail. This card is actually set up, if you look at it, it looks like a driver's license. It has a whole bunch of barcodes on it and a bunch of numbers on it. If all the information's thrown out on these people applying for this, what does that even come back to? Well, you're documented undocumented.
Exactly.
Residents.
And so our last guest, your fellow alderman, told us that in order to get registered to vote in Chicago, you had to produce a birth certificate. That's not true, is it?
It's absolutely not true. And then, you know what,
So that's a lie. I just want to be totally clear. That's a lie that he just told.
We actually pulled it off the computer. We pulled off a sheet as well. And you can actually fill it out online, mail it in. You check a box and you sign your name to it. That's it. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And in fact, I want to bring our previous, I don't know if he'll come back, but I just want to confront him with that because I think, is he willing to come back? I'm asking my producer. So you just heard that. You claimed at the beginning of our segment that you had to show proof of citizenship, a birth certificate in order to register to vote, but that's not true. And I just want to be totally clear with our viewers of that. Do you want to stick with that false claim?
I read the rules and the law, so I'm not sure where Anthony Napolitano, Alderman Napolitano, is getting this information from. But clearly, there's a difference of opinion here and a difference of facts.
Okay, so but are you saying that every person who registers to vote in your state has shown proof of citizenship of the United States? Is that your claim?
People who register to vote have to show two forms of ID. One of them could be a passport, which requires you to be a citizen, a birth certificate, which shows where you're born, a driver's license, a social security card, and now you can show this as one of the two.
Oh, so you don't actually have to show proof of citizenship because, of course, this card has none of that data on it, and a social security card can be bought down the street. I mean, that's the whole point. Right. Okay.
But you need
Tucker, just a point of clarification, too, as well, is that after this ID was created by the city of Chicago, the Illinois State Board of Election has come out and said that they will accept the city key as a form of ID to register to vote.
Right.
So you can go into that in there and we're crossing our fingers that you don't check that you attest.
I got it. This is voter fraud. This is the end of citizenship. And unfortunately, it's also the end of the segment because we're totally out of time. Gentlemen, thank you both for that. That was interesting. We've got an update on that gun control rally that CNN held last week. After the event, a high school student called Colton Hobb claimed that CNN tried to give him a scripted question to ask on camera. Colton came on this show last week on Thursday to tell his story. CNN denied the account. Now, Colton and his parents sent us their email correspondence with CNN, which seemed to confirm Colton's claim that his question had been altered by a CNN producer. On Friday, we asked CNN to verify and comment on those emails because that was our journalistic duty, so we did it. A short time before air, CNN provided us a different set of emails. We immediately asked the Hobbs about those. They said they were being slandered by CNN, and that's where it stood. Two sides telling contradictory stories. Without access to their email accounts, we could only guess which one was telling the truth, and guessing is not enough. Tonight we have more. We have an update. The Hobb family concedes that they did remove a line from one of their emails in a way that might make some think its meaning had changed. Colton's father says it was accidental. We don't know. We can't prove or disprove that. But for the sake of honesty and full disclosure, to which we are committed, we have to tell you there is no evidence as of right now that CNN tried to give Colton Hobb a scripted question. And we wanted you to know that. A Republican congressman is reintroducing a Democratic bill from 2013 verbatim, word for word, but suddenly Democrats are not eager to pass it. Why is that? We'll tell you next. Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida has introduced a bill in Congress that would increase oversight of the FISA courts, the courts that allow the government to spy on you, by making judges subject to presidential appointment and Senate confirmation, bringing a little democracy and transparency to the process. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California may find that bill familiar. To his credit, by the way, he introduced the exact same bill verbatim, word for word, 5 years ago. But apparently this time he's not eager to back his own law. Why is that? Did his principles change, or just his short-term political calculations? We've invited Congressman Matt Gaetz to join us, as well as former Hillary Clinton campaign advisor Richard Goodstein. Welcome to you both. To you, Congressman, first. This is word for word the same bill, and tell me if I'm wrong. And the person who wrote the bill is refusing to support it this time, or seems like he won't. Why is that?
It seems odd, Tucker, that when Barack Obama was president, Democrats wanted to give the president more power to work with the Senate to get members of the FISA court that aren't part of the D.C. swamp, but that come from all over America and have the opportunity to represent the values that Americans hold dear regarding their liberties. I didn't change one comma in Adam Schiff's bill. I refiled it because I think that Republicans and Democrats are going to be in power in the future, and if there are bipartisan ideas that would have more transparency and more oversight and protect our civil liberties, I think we ought to work together rather than working separately.
So did he send you a thankful text when you did that?
You know, I asked for him to co-sponsor it, and I just haven't heard back yet, Tucker. It's a strange coincidence.
That? Richard, would you mind calling him? I mean,
I'll try.
And by the way, I just want to be totally clear. Good for Adam Schiff, whom I rarely compliment, for introducing this bill in the first place 5 years ago. It seems like a common sense reform of the kind we need. Why wouldn't he support it now?
Can I just remind you why he introduced the bill? This was in light of the Edward Snowden leaks, right? There were, thanks to WikiLeaks, who were vilified by Republicans back then, and Donald Trump says, I love WikiLeaks on the campaign trail, okay? So my point is, things get twisted in odd ways. You'll have to ask Adam Schiff what his problem is.
No, hold on, no. He wasn't just vilified by Republicans, but also by Democrats.
Absolutely.
Just to be fair. And I don't know why Republicans didn't support it then. They should support it, and so should everyone. But honestly, how could Adam Schiff, who poses as a man of principle, fail to support his own bill? That doesn't make sense, does it?
Again, I think the rules of the Senate have actually changed about confirming judges. So I think you'd have to ask him. I'm not here as his defender.
You're a little disappointed, though. You'd have to be, right?
I think, back then he had Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley and other liberal Democrats who were supporting the principle in the interest of protecting individual freedoms. So, yeah, I think there's something behind it.
8 of them still cared about that.
Of course. Why does it have
none
to be
do
partisan?
now. Well, I totally agree. So, but all of this gets to the core question in these dueling memos, Republican and Democrat, Nunes and Schiff, get to the question of the FISA warrant. What did the DOJ say in order to spy on Carter Page? Why can't we see that? Why can't we decide for ourselves?
We should, Tucker, and I'm glad that the White House has joined the call to see more of what was in this FISA application, and I think that we'll be able to see things that Adam Schiff wrote that are verifiably untrue. And I think that will bolster the claims that we're making on the Republican side that there needs to be reform and there needs to be accountability for people at the FBI who withheld the political origins of this dossier from the court. That's the real problem here. There's no dispute that cash at the DNC was convertible into a government-sponsored warrant to spy on American citizens. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, that should concern you because it could happen to any of us. That's why we need reform. And frankly, it'd be nice if we didn't all, go to our separate corners politically, if we found some ideas that Republicans or Democrats had offered that would provide the transparency and oversight to give the American people confidence.
Well, I agree. And I hope, Richard, and who knows, but I really sincerely hope if the roles were reversed and the RNC had paid for a document that some Republican administration had used to spy on a rival political campaign, that I would be principled enough to say, you know what, that is an abuse of power, because it is. Why? And I'm sure you agree as a civil libertarian. You just said that you were. We should be worried about that. So why shouldn't we see the FISA application?
I am a civil libertarian, but I'm more so an American citizen who cares for kind of the integrity of the United States. And I think what the FBI was concerned with, for good reason, I believe, is that Carter Page was, as they concluded, a foreign agent. And maybe they didn't even know what the Trump people knew. I will say this. The Russians approached one campaign and one campaign only, the Trump campaign, not the Clinton campaign.
I know he's in the pocket of Putin. We've heard this before.
No, but I'm saying...
But it's really simple. Why can't we just cede the FISA application? It's really, this is our government. They spied on an American citizen. Perhaps they had good reason. Perhaps they didn't. Why can't we know?
Well, you have to ask the FISA court.
But why wouldn't you support that? Why don't Democrats say, let's end this nonsense and find out why they did this?
So it's a question of kind of what the relevant rules are, because the FISA is secret by design. But again, the fact of the matter is, what Schiff said and is unrebutted is that the dossier had relatively little role in getting that warrant.
Let's find out.
And it was in a footnote. There was a reference.
But how do we know? Why don't look? Is there any support in the Congress for ending? If the Russians want to control our political process, they're doing it now by paralyzing everything with this stupid debate, which we could end instantly by making this stuff public. Is there support for doing that in your Congress?
I believe that there's support on the Republican side to release the entire FISA application, as long as we're able to redact sources and methods, where I think we should be able to find agreement. I don't think the Democrats will want to do that, because the dossier was the lead piece of evidence. It's what every lawyer Tucker, starts with their best evidence.
We should.
And I agree with the congressman. I agree with the congressman that this should be put out. But again, there's no disputing that the whole investigation preceded the dossier being concluded. Papadopoulos was the tip of that spear.
We don't know that. And let's just find out, and then we'll do a show on it after that. Maybe we could not do any Russia until the Congress releases this and lets the people decide what they think. We can put this to bed.
Good luck.
God bless
I'd be
you.
for it.
Both. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks, Tucker.
Barbara Streisand's out and about. She says the president caused the Parkland shooting, apparently via black magic. We'll tell you how he did that, and she said it. Stay tuned. Well, there's still no evidence that the 2016 election was hacked in any way, but rather than back down from that claim, some are getting bolder with it. In a recent interview with Variety, singer and actress Barbara Streisand says that the 2016 election was stolen with rigged voting machines. She also believes the George W. Bush wins in 2000 and 2004 were the product of rigged voting machines, too. Apparently, the riggers took a break in 2008 and 2012 for Obama. Streisand also blamed the president for the Parkland shooting. She said he, quote, brings out the violence in people like a shaman. Joe Concha writes about the media for The Hill. He joins us tonight. Joe, it's good to see you. So the question is not, no one's surprised by Barbara Streisand saying this. The question is how it was covered. Did the press cover this like they cover, I don't know, Sarah Palin's kids in breathless disbelief, in shock and horror? Or did they just kind of let it go?
Let it go in a big way, Tucker. You mentioned how Barbara Streisand brought up how she knows for a fact that voting machines in Wisconsin and Michigan were compromised, that votes were actually changed. And she says she knows this by speaking to senators in Wisconsin and Michigan. So the writer of this Variety piece, I get it's kind of a puff piece and celebrity. You'd think he'd kind of follow up maybe with the 3 Democratic senators in in Michigan and in Wisconsin, or maybe one of the Republican ones there, doubtful that that's who she spoke to, and say, hey, she's saying that this actually happened, did it? And of course they would say no, because there's no evidence of that whatsoever. Right. So yeah, she's allowed to say things like that and get away with it. Now, as far as blaming President Trump on the Parkland shooting, do understand this. Since Columbine in 1999, there have been 25 fatal mass shootings at elementary and high schools. These horrific events have happened under the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration. So how this suddenly is happening under the current administration just shows you why President Trump, one of the reasons why he won last year is because he had no Hollywood support, but that probably was a good thing, because when they say things like this, obviously they seem just a tad out of touch.
What's interesting is that people as famous as Barbara Streisand used to be able to say, kind of whatever they wanted in the press, and there was no feeling that you had to kind of fact check it because they're from celebrity land and, who cares what they think? But now there's this weird double standard where if an actor expresses any right of center view, he's hounded by PolitiFact as if he's running for office, and yet Barbara Streisand still has this unlimited pass to say unsupported things like this.
Right, and they also could get blacklisted from getting major roles as well. And, you know, we play Parallel Universe almost every week when I'm on this program, Parallel Universe meaning, in other words, let's pretend this was said during the previous administration under the 44th president and President Obama. Let's say that Johnny Depp had joked about assassinating the president, or Madonna threatened to blow up the White House, or Kathy Griffin held up a severed head that resembled President Obama. The outrage would be overwhelming. You would need to add 4 more hours to 24/7 cable news just to cover it. But when it happens here, while it does get some coverage, it's almost laughed off, kind of muted, maybe not with Griffin, but with many other celebrities who have said, you know, the president should die, or Mickey Rourke's case, I'd love to take a Louisville Slugger to this guy. And it just gets laughed off because of who the target is and not so much about what's being said.
So let me ask you a very quick question. I'm not attacking anybody, but have you ever read a piece that said, you know, Barbra Streisand's a really nice person and kind of kind to her assistant and decent to the people around her and sort of beloved by her friends and acquaintances? I haven't read that piece. Have you ever read that piece?
Maybe once or twice, but in this piece also, in Variety,
I've never seen it.
I mean, this was kind of, this was sick, and I'll wrap up quickly because I know you got to go. She cloned her dead dog and created 2 other dogs off of it. This is a woman that's worth $390 million, and you have millions of dogs, pets that are up for adoption every year, hundreds of thousands that are euthanized, and here she is going about it this way. You know, maybe rescue a couple with the money that you have, or you know, commit to a charity.
Yeah, I don't know.
like the
I can't get with you on that. I mean, I know it's morally complicated. Augustine would disapprove. I'd probably clone my Springer Spaniel because I couldn't control myself. But we disagree. Great to see you, Joe.
Okay. Pleasure's all on this side of the table. Trust me.
Thank you. Amazon.com is run by literally the richest man in the world, in human history, actually. The company made billions in profits last year. But somehow, Amazon is paying no federal income tax. Are you paying federal income tax? They're not. Why? That story next. Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world, the richest man who's ever lived in the world. Amazon, his company, is one of the country's most valuable. But the company's tax payments are not keeping up with its great wealth. Okay, that's a profound understatement. Here's one example. Last year, Amazon made $5.6 billion in profit. They netted that. But they used tax credits and other benefits to avoid paying any federal income tax. Did you pay federal income tax last year? Oh, one of the biggest companies in the world paid none. Nevertheless, governments around this country, state and local, are racing to provide Amazon with even more perks and tax breaks as it looks to choose the site of its second headquarters, because masochism is very common among state government. Heather Zubarraga is a financial analyst and a very smart one, and she joins us tonight. Heather, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
So how does it work that one of the biggest companies in the world, an American company, pays no federal taxes?
Well, that's a good question. I think this is a nonpartisan issue. President Trump has stated that Amazon is a no-tax monopoly, right? Both Democrats and Republicans alike would say that we're in agreement with that statement, and that is not okay. Although they do pay state and local income taxes, they pay zero federal income tax.
Let me just correct one thing there. Actually, no. The New York Times today leapt to Amazon's defense, in effect, by saying, oh, that's not really true. I mean, they instinctively defended a company for paying no federal taxes. This is how upside down our world is.
That's unusual. I would expect most Democrats or a liberal newspaper or source to back to not back a big corporation paying zero federal income tax.
Yeah, you would think that, but it's a very liberal corporation, so maybe they see themselves as a lie.
So here's the reason why they get away with it. From the source's various tax breaks, right? They're saying that executive stock options are allowing them to pay zero federal income tax. Now, it's not illegal. These are tax loopholes. It's in our tax code, our current tax system, so they're taking advantage of that. But it doesn't seem right or fair. A company that raked in $175 billion last year. This just isn't right. I'm sure you paid more in federal taxes.
Well, I did, but also
Amazon.
I haven't put tens of thousands of people out of work like Amazon has. They've hired a lot, but they put many more out of work. They've destroyed many more businesses than they've created. Look, I get it. That's the nature of market capitalism, but they feel no obligation to give back at all to the federal treasury? Treasury at all?
Well, what's worse is that they're able to grandfather in deferred taxes. So deferred taxes, those that they've delayed in the past, which is perfectly legal, now they can have those taxed at the lower corporate tax rate effective January 1 of 21% versus 35% when the income and revenue was earned in the prior years, 2014, 2015. So, I mean, that's ridiculous. We would all love to resend our taxes, right, and let me pay my lower individual income rate now, because individual rates are now taxed at a lower bracket as are corporate rates, and that's just ludicrous. That shouldn't be allowed.
No, it shouldn't, and yet the default, and even, the president said this during the campaign, the default for people in businesses, well, it's allowed, therefore you got to do it. Well, it's also allowed to scream obscenities at your elderly parents, but it's wrong, and you shouldn't do it. No, but it's not illegal, okay? There are a lot of things that aren't illegal, but they're immoral. And so, does any company ever say, you know what, this is our nation, America, and we're going to give back a little bit, maybe? Do they ever say that?
Yeah, well, they should, and it gets worse, because at the state and local level, they're now offering tax incentives for Amazon to put their second headquarters in their town, and all. That's a legitimate thing to want for your city, not at the expense of taxpayers.
Right, I agree. Now, Amazon, we reached out to them today, did not respond. One of the questions I wanted to ask, and I'll end on this, does that mean I still have to pay my federal taxes?
You do.
Do our viewers have to pay theirs?
Unfortunately, as the current tax code stands, we do, and that's just how it is.
Okay, so we do, but Jeff Bezos does. I just want to be totally clear. Heather, thank you for straightening it out for us. This is turning me into like a crazy person. Barack Obama just claimed at MIT that his administration never had a scandal, not one, thanks to the magic of diversity. That's what he said. Britt Hume joins us next to identify which planet the former president is living on. We'll be right back. President Obama spoke at MIT on Friday and immediately began rewriting history. He made the claim that his administration was scandal-free thanks to the magical power of diversity. Running guns to Mexican cartels didn't happen. Weaponizing the IRS and the FBI against political opponents, fake news. Well, Obama has been patting himself on his back. The party he shattered is searching for a champion in the next election. Fox's Juan Williams just argued in an opinion piece that President Trump's three strongest challengers would all be African-American women: Oprah, Michelle Obama, and Senator Kamala Harris of California. Is that true? Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume joins us tonight. Britt, so the first question, thanks for coming on, is that true? Do you think diversity kept Barack Obama's 2 terms entirely scandal-free?
Well, I don't think it was entirely scandal-free. You just mentioned a couple of examples, and then there's another one, a kind of a howler, and that is his Secretary of State so recklessly mishandled classified information that she was very nearly indicted, and many legal experts think she should have been. I would rate that as a pretty big scandal. I don't think diversity had anything to do with it one way or another, but it certainly argues against the idea that it was scandal-free. It wasn't.
It's funny, though. I mean, the former president, and to really do his credit, I mean, he hasn't been, I mean, this was apparently an off-the-record comment that got reported. He hasn't been in the news, really, and I think that's exactly what a former president should be, not around. However, it seems a little early to start rewriting the history of an administration that just ended, doesn't it?
Well, look, all presidents try to see their administrations in the most favorable possible light, and he's looking back on his, and I'm sure he's looking at the man in the White House and trying to create a contrast with him, because Obama, whether you liked him or not, did behave himself with a certain dignity and grace that some have found lacking in Donald Trump. Clearly, Obama has found that lacking in Donald Trump, and I think he'd like to contrast his performance in office with that of Mr. Trump, but to say that his administration is scandal-free is nonsense.
Yeah, it is. So there was a piece this week by our colleague and friend, Juan Williams. I'm not signaling him out. A lot of people have basically written this, but said that the 3 main challengers to President Trump, who made, in effect, announcements that he's running again 3 years from now, would be Oprah, Michelle Obama, and Kamala Harris of California, all 3 black women. What struck me about this was the way it was framed, and the way so many of these conversations are framed. They primarily turn on questions of race and gender. Is that the future, do you think, of American politics, identity politics?
Well, it certainly is the future of the Democratic Party. Indeed, it's the present of the Democratic Party that it looks at things that way. And being a woman and being a minority would be an important credential for nomination in the Democratic Party. It doesn't mean you won't. That doesn't mean you're going to get the nomination, but it gives you a leg up. It gave Hillary Clinton a leg up and enabled her to fight off the rather significant challenge from a geriatric socialist in the person of Bernie Sanders. One might have thought that would have been easy, but such is the Democratic Party today that it wasn't easy at all. And if you're looking ahead to 2020, whoever it is likely to need to have quite leftist credentials in order to touch the heart of the Democratic Party, which is far to the left of where it used to be. I think all three of the women described, I'm not really sure where Oprah is on all the issues. I really haven't looked into it very carefully because I doubt she's going to run. Kamala Harris has certainly shown herself to be quite liberal, and certainly Michelle Obama would be seen in that light as well. I think Kamala Harris, by the way, would be an interesting candidate. She has a tendency to make gaffes and say particularly amazing things. For example, she said that Sheriff Joe Arpaio should not have been pardoned because he'd committed a crime. Well, madam, that's why he needed to be pardoned. She also said that it was wrong to say that the Dreamers were unlawful. Well, that's part of the definition of what the Dreamers are. They came here and are here illegally, and that's why we're trying to, so many people are working so hard to try to find a way to keep them here. They wouldn't be subject to deportation if they weren't unlawful. But such is Kamala Harris. I think Michelle Obama, Tucker, would be an imposing candidate.
Interesting. So, I mean, can we just be totally honest and say that, Terry McAuliffe was making noises about running the other day, and there are a number of people who look like Terry McAuliffe saying they're going to run as Democrats. Nobody like Terry McAuliffe is going to get the nomination this time. I mean,
no, I don't think so. I think Terry McAuliffe he's too much. I think Terry McAuliffe would probably be seen as too much of a creature of the Democratic Party as it once was under Bill Clinton and later under Hillary Clinton. And I don't think that's where the Democratic Party is now. Consider this, Tucker. Dianne Feinstein was just Dianne Feinstein, who's, not a liberal on everything, but a liberal on nearly everything. Was just denied the endorsement of the Democratic Party in California, and Dan Lipinski, who is a congressman from the southwest side of Chicago, or just his district also includes some of the suburbs there, was just given the heave-ho by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in his reelection bid in favor of a more liberal candidate. This is where that party is going, and if you're going to win a nomination in this party in 2020, in my estimation, you're going to have to be pretty far out there. And if you're Elizabeth Warren, you might have the credentials, you might not have the right skin color, but Michelle Obama might indeed fit the bill.
I think it's been an undercovered story for a long time, and I appreciate that, Britt. I think you're right. Good to see you.
You bet.
College students, of course, can't handle free speech or most other rights these days. A lot of them can, it seems like. But what campuses are the worst on free expression? Where can't you say what you think at all? We'll give you the top 10 for free speech next.